All right. Hey, everybody. My name is Missy, also known as the Body Intuitive, and I'm here today with my friend Vishal. I'm super excited to speak with him. And I just invited him on today to talk to you guys about how to start your own personalized mobility practice. There's a lot of amazing things I could say about Vishal, but I'd rather let him introduce himself. Why don't you tell the people who are watching or listening a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Vishal. I'm currently based in the Bay Area. A little background about myself, I guess. I actually lived down in Southern California for a while. That's where I kind of got into the whole kinesiology and studying about the body and learning all the cool things. I've always been pretty kind of active, I guess, throughout my life. And the one interesting thing for me is I've always embodied some form of a practice. And I guess, it was through just being put into different things as a kid and then continuing to do those things like as an adult. And it was something I didn't really think about much up until, probably the past few years. And when I was in school, I studied like exercise science, and then I got into mobility, a lot of mobility stuff through my own injuries. So I trained jiu-jitsu and I acquired a fair amount of injuries from that, and it kind of stopped me from doing a lot of the things I enjoyed doing. And I was like, there has to be a better way. There has to be a different type of way to train that's more sustainable. So I kind of dove down the rabbit hole, found the FRC kind of system or functional anatomy seminars, got deep into that, really resonated with me. I've just kind of continued on and through a lot of things. I've taught yoga, have a martial arts background. I have played traditional sports. Currently I do a lot of the Ido Portal kind of method training. So I train with Johnny in San Francisco at SF Movement Practice, and that's been amazing because it kind of embodies all these different things. So it gave me more exposure to elements of dance and elements of gymnastics and other things that I wasn't applying in my training, that now I have all these really awesome tools to choose from. And that's kind of the demographic of people I work with now. It's kind of actually transitioning a little bit, but mainly going after people that are coming off some type of injury or experiencing some type of pain in the body. And then also people that are looking to expand their knowledge of just movement in their own body. And, that I feel like that can segue a lot into traditional forms of training, but then I kind of like now more of the movement sector. It's just more expression. To me, it's a little bit more fun too.
Wow, that's amazing. So you combine so many different fields and disciplines together, and I just find that so fascinating because you have so much knowledge. Coming from such a multidisciplinary background, how would you define practice? Because we throw out this word like, oh, your practice, like it's a big thing, and even in the yoga community, we call it sangha, which is it's not just something mundane that you do every day. It has like almost a sacredness to it. Could you define for us what your version of what it means to have a practice, like for somebody who's never done something like this before, and you're like, oh, you should have a practice, like what would you tell them that means?
Yeah, I think to me, the practice is something that kind of defines, like, what are your non-negotiables? I think the practice or elements of the practice can change over time. Like, I know definitely my practices change in a lot of ways depending on what my focus is. But now I'm finding that I kind of value specific things more, and those are my non-negotiables that I kind of run through every day. So no matter whatever else I'm doing around that, those are the things that I try to stay consistent with. And I think practice should be, doing the things that you're going to have some consistency with over, long periods of time. Like currently I'm doing a lot more meditation than I used to before. Mobility work has, been a focus for a long time, but now it's definitely like my non-negotiable. So even if I'm not feeling great or don't have enough time, I still stick with those things. And it's actually really funny. So I read this quote this morning by the author James Clear. So he wrote that book, Atomic Habits, which is a phenomenal book. It's like really straightforward and simple. But one of the things he kind of posted this morning was about identity and how the things that you create as habits, in order for them to stick, kind of need to be a part of your identity. And that I thought was just a really awesome statement, because people have such a hard time, or we have such a hard time installing new habits. It takes a lot of conscious effort to change. And it's going to be easier to have that change be more adaptable to you and your lifestyle if you embody that as a whole, if that becomes a part of you and who you are and what you stand for.
I absolutely love that too. So it's like, I mean, even if somebody doesn't necessarily identify as having a practice, it's like, well, no, you do have a practice, and your practice is the things that you consistently do day after day after day. So if that includes sitting on the couch and watching TV, you're very well practiced at sitting on the couch and watching TV. People might not think about it that way, right? But
Right.
I guess two things that that really struck me from what you said were that it's a choice and not a non-negotiable, and the other thing is the consistency, which is a huge principle that we'll be teaching in the Start Your Personalized Mobility Practice course, because without that consistency, like you said, it's really hard to change habits.
Right. Yeah. No, 100%.
So what tips would you give to somebody to be consistent? Because I know a lot of us like have the best of intentions. I think most people would really like to do something like this, but they just don't know how, or it feels like, oh, I don't have the time, or they'll start for a little bit and then stop doing it and then get really hard on themselves, and it kind of turns into this shame cycle. So what tips or techniques do you have for just the average person to try to overcome some of those obstacles?
Yeah, I think to facilitate change and like install these new habits and develop a practice, to me, the simplest way is to start really small. Like people tend to have like these really big, awesome goals, and it's great to want to achieve those things. But realistically, I think it takes very small amounts of change over extended periods of time, especially if this is something that you want to maintain as a consistent practice. And you look at like, okay, well, I want to start doing an hour of mobility training a day for the next 6 months. Like that's a big commitment. You have to cut out, something else. There has to be a trade-off. So how about just doing 10
Some
minutes in the
kind of
morning?
sacrifice.
100, yeah, exactly. There's going to be a sacrifice that needs to be made. And, to make that big shift, it might not be realistic to do off the bat. So starting small. So instead of an hour, maybe do 10 minutes in the morning and like see how you feel and see how it goes. Maybe your body will crave more later. But I think starting small and just keeping things really, really simple is like one of the best ways to start, integrating a new practice.
I love that. And so I guess start small could be relative too. So if somebody's, more advanced in some kind of practice, it could be start small in terms of moving your practice in another direction, or just take some of the time that you've already dedicated. Whereas somebody who's newer to the idea of a practice overall, it might be just making the time for the practice in the first place is enough
Yeah.
of a task.
Yeah, 100%. Like for me, like an example for myself was like hand balancing, right? I'm not great at hand balancing and I'm trying to work on it. And I was like, well, I need to develop more awareness being upside down. And I can't develop the awareness. I felt like I couldn't develop it as efficiently if I was doing like long sessions, maybe every other day. So like, let me just start doing 15 minutes every day. Like find 15 minutes and just spend time on the wall and really get to know the wall and just hang out there and embrace the suck of being upside down for an extended period of time until it sucks a little less. Yeah. And then over time that, I found that awareness to develop. And then now my sessions for that are more consistent and they're longer. And then you have progress. So.
Right. It's almost like building up a muscle, but instead of like a physical muscle, it's just strengthening your habits in a sense, and it takes less effort over time to re-choose the same things you've already done once you've kind of grooved that channel in.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I think as to what you said earlier, everyone's going to have a different amount of time to give to different things. If you're a more experienced practitioner and you want to start adding in new things, like maybe you prioritize it more and you give yourself more time to do it. But if we're talking kind of most people out there that aren't on this level of obsession, kind of like how we are with things in our bodies, I have to kind of like remove myself
You
from
mean amazing?
that. Yes, there you go. Yeah, but I think realistically, I look at for my clients, it's with, say, nutrition. I don't believe in like going cold turkey and it's like, all right, we're going to do a 6-week cleanse where you're just going to go cold turkey and cut out everything you know and love, because chances are, that type of crash dieting, it'll have a lot of different effects. Like maybe you'll get the physical benefits, but like mentally, emotionally, you're going to be drained and you won't be that happy. And is it going to actually stick after that process? So, just making small shifts in perspective alone, where people think, oh, I don't have enough time. It's like, well, where is your time going? Like start asking yourself, where
Mm.
are you finding, like, are there moments in your day where you're wasting time, or maybe you don't think you're wasting time, but you could replace that with something that might be more valuable to you in order to develop a practice, because there has to be
Mm.
a trade-off. You have to kind of give to get. And if I think people want to start doing things that are, especially really good for their body, maybe it's reading. Like I started reading a lot more recently, and that means I'm on Instagram 30 minutes less a day, which is definitely a win. um, but that was a positive trade-off for me in that, and it I don't lose time in my day. I'm actually gaining more by giving myself
Mm.
that 30 minutes to read instead of be on social media. So
So it sounds like a big part of this is time management in a way where it's like you really have to look at and self-assess in a very almost brutally honest way, like what am I spending my time on, and are those things in alignment with the direction that I want to move my life in, and are you making choices in alignment with those values? So it's not just about like habits and set something up on your schedule, it's like what's everything else going in behind that. And I think that's something that most people don't really think about or realize when they start out on a journey like this, because I don't know about you, but I guess I get asked a lot, like, oh, what pose should I do for this? So like give me X thing for Y problem or Y pain problem,
right.
when really it's not just about, okay, what's the magic pill for this pain, or what's the best technical way to do this pose. It's like, well, you got to be able to put in the time to get to that point and build up the foundation in the first place. Um, so yeah, I would, my question would be then, for people who have like not conflicting, but just a lot of different priorities. So say for example, like you want to read, you want to meditate, and you want to do your mobility practice. Like that's already 3 things. And so
Right.
I'm like, okay, if I'm doing only 10 minutes a day, how do I know what to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of like when it comes to physical practice, like the mobility work, finding the right source of education, which I think you can, in this particular case, help people out with. But yeah, I think, really understanding on a fundamental level, like what it is you're trying to do, get really good and focus on the basics. It doesn't have to be complicated. And I think we live in a world where things are always trying to be, people are trying to overcomplicate things. And, even when it comes to training, I always come back to like a handful of basic things. If it's reading, then I'm picking not 10 different topics to read on. It's kind of whatever is going on in my life at that time, and something that I'll find value in, I'll read on that topic. So, I think just being efficient, and then having just like the right information, or presenting yourself with the right information at the time, is going to also have that practice be a lot more beneficial, especially in the moment, because the practice will change, it'll evolve over time. At least I think it will in some regards. And yeah, like for me, I have my non-negotiables, but I'm sure like a year from now, they'll be completely different.
Right. So do you give yourself a lot of latitude in what you practice every day? So it's like your non-negotiable is that you have this 30 minutes or hour, whatever it is in your day, and it almost doesn't matter like what you do. Do you like program out your practices, or does it flow, or is it some combination of both for you?
I think it's definitely a combination of both. So I have the things that I do every day. So like I meditate now like 15 minutes every morning. Like I make sure that my alarm is set and I have enough time. So I get up and it's like one of the first things I do that way. Yeah, it's like I have no excuse. All right, unless I sleep in or I miss it, in the morning, but I'll make sure to make time for it later in the day. With some of the other stuff, I think uh, it'll vary. Like if it's mobility work, my body feels different every day, but I've been able to, I think, develop enough awareness over a long period of time to know that I can kind of swap certain things out. But for my clients, I kind of give them a very structured set of movements, a lot of it inspired by FRC, the FRC kind of
Mhm.
cars or controlled articular rotations, which are basically just a joint by joint personal assessment. And I think that's like a really simple checklist that most people should do all the time. And then from there you can build on it. If you feel that maybe your shoulder or neck is a little tighter than it was yesterday, you can put some more energy into that and focus on that. But for me personally, I have my baseline with those movements, and then depending on how I feel day to day, I'll dive a little deeper into some areas, or I won't. Maybe I'll feel a little better. Already.
Gotcha. So it sounds like your main non-negotiable staples are, mindset, meditation practices daily, your cars routine daily, and the specifics of what else gets added on top of that might just vary from week to week. Like if you're working on a specific skill set or trying to build strength for a specific application like jujitsu or something like that, you may need to vary your training accordingly. So I'm going to go back to something you mentioned, because you're like, I have the awareness now to kind of know what my body needs. And I hope this doesn't come across the wrong way, but a lot of people don't have that awareness.
Sure.
Right. So
Yeah.
again, like for somebody who's starting out and be like, okay, where do I get this information? How do I build awareness of my body? Like I'm just trying to figure out what a car is in the first place. Like,
Right.
how do I know what to do with that? Like, so I do this self-assessment, now what?
It's the funny thing is like people always want more, but the answer, in my opinion, is less. Like it's repetition of the same thing, and then the magic happens when you continue to find deeper layers of stuff within the same thing. So if I'm doing like a shoulder car, or some type of mobilization on my body, and I did that exact drill 2 years ago, I will have a different awareness to that drill now, because I've just been doing the same thing. And I feel like the feedback I get from myself is a little bit more in tune. And yeah, you kind of uncover these layers, and it sounds kind of crazy and weird. It's like, what if I do the same thing over and over, like it's going to feel different? Like, yeah, it will.
Makes
Because
sense
that,
to me.
yeah, because that awareness develops, and like I'm sure you've had this with clients, and I've had this with clients where they've come to me and they've asked for more things, and I'm like, well, how are the things that we've been working on? Like, let's see. And I'll have them run me through I'll have them run through the drills, and I'll kind of observe. And I can find, like, I can pinpoint kind of little things within that movement of like, well, okay, you've been working on this thing for 3 months. We can add, maybe one or two things, but here are one or two areas that you can try to improve on within the things that we're already working. And then here are how those things translate. to maybe other movements that you're doing throughout the day, and other movements in life. So whether you're working with athletes, whether you're working with desk jockeys, and everything in between, I think any athlete's going to tell you, like, get really good at the fundamentals, get really good at the basics, like master the fundamentals before you start to add complexity, at least within things that should embody a practice.
That's really cool. So, and that reflects back on what you're saying earlier of keep things simple. You know what I mean? Like if you're just really focused on a few basic things every day or consistently week after week, the nature of those things will change in your life too. And it's almost like any other space that you have can quickly and easily be filled by any number of things. And that kind of keeps things like fresh and interesting. But it sounds like you really just distill it down to a few core things and build the structure around that and make it cumulative from there. And I would say that really resonates and reflects the structure that I teach my students too, because I mean, I'll even have students who come in and will be like, I've been practicing yoga for 10 years, but they don't have, like, they still have limitations in their mobility. You know what I mean? So I think regardless of your specific discipline or practice or sport or whatever it is, however it is you want to use your body, like movement is movement and bodies are bodies. So at the core, they're all going to need and be nourished by similar things.
Yeah. And then one thing that you touched on was, in terms of structure. So I really like, can we talk about structure? Because
yes,
I think it's great. Like everyone needs structure at first, and I think the structure is what can help instill the habits of developing
the discipline.
Yeah, the discipline. And then once you have that structure and you know it pretty well, and you own it, then don't be afraid to break the structure, because that's where I think you can find a bit more of the exploration and the awareness. So like now, I have a structure that I've been using for a long time, and I have multiple structures that I could revert to, but I kind of stay consistent with one. And then I'm also not afraid to go in and just be like, I'm gonna throw this out the window and just and kind of see what my body wants to do and what it feels like it needs. And it does take time to some degree to develop that, but that's also a sliding scale. Like even if someone is coming from a baseline of 0 and they install some structure for a few weeks with some basic movements, like their body is going to start to crave things. Like they're going to feel things they've never felt before because they're rebuilding these lines of communication. So I think also people should not be afraid to explore that when it speaks to them.
I love that. So how the course is prepared is it's split up into like an introduction and then 5 main steps. And so the last step in the course is exactly what you're talking about. I forget exactly what it's called, but it's like it's centered around this Ayurvedic concept of Ritucharya, whereas Dinacharya is your daily routine and Ritucharya is how you change and adapt those routines to seasonal cycles or just the cycles of life, like as we go through big life transitions and things like that too. And so I was thinking about this of, how can I educate somebody to know when it's time to make a shift in your practice? And this could be just very pragmatic, practical things like it's winter now, so maybe move your practice inside so you're not freezing like it's bad for your body.
Yeah.
To all right, you're going through a big divorce or you're changing jobs or something like that. And so, maybe some of these structures in your life have to shift a little bit. So can you speak to that a little bit more and maybe give some tips or advice on how you can know when it's time to either stick more closely to your structure or to look for another structure that's more suitable to what your needs are?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. Like I think I just try to put all this stuff in the context of like my own experience. But I've tend to work through like specific structure, and then when I feel that I have definitely some sense of ownership through, especially with movement, like you can see if you can physically see if your movement looks like shit or not. Like if it, it's pretty obvious. And um, when it starts to look better and feel better and um, just fluid, then I think that can be the time when you can start to explore new things, and maybe you're seeking something else. For me personally, it's been this constant like search for truth, in a degree, with
Mm.
all the varied forms of training, like whether it was martial arts or like, I have taught yoga, like now it's like movement stuff. It's been like weight training and, all these varied things. And within each context, um, they each have their own sense of truth. And I just kind of think it really becomes dependent on the person, like where they're at in their life, what they're looking for in that moment. Like if you're experiencing pain, then your goal is going to be to get yourself out of pain or experience less pain, whether that's physical, mental,
Mm.
emotional. And then when you start to be in that place of less pain through the structure that you've used to get there, then it's time to grow and, spread the wings and, explore something new, or maybe add on to that foundation that you've now built. Um, but that's going to vary, over long periods of time, I think. And
So just to summarize, sorry to cut you off, but to
yeah,
summarize, it sounds like you're saying keep a structure in place until you've mastered it or have ownership over it, or unless there's another bigger priority which takes place, such as something like pain or an injury or life transition or something
yeah,
or the other.
yeah, exactly. Like for me, for my physical practice of training was, through SF movement practice, I was training an obsessive amount and I loved it. And it was like a year and a half. I just went deep and all I did was train all day, every day. And then I was like, I want to start a company and reshift my life in this different direction. And so my mindset had to completely change. I'm like, I don't have now like 3 to 5 hours a day to train. I barely have 90 minutes a day to train, or, every other day. So what does that look like for me? That was a huge shift for myself. And like, it's a mindset I had to put myself in to even get to that place. And this kind of acceptance I needed to have. And I'm like, it's okay. Like, it's okay, because change is good. And if I want the change that I'm seeking, this truth that I'm seeking for a new direction with my life, then something needs to give. I need to sacrifice something, but I have now enough context within the structure that I've used through the movement practice for, the year and a half, to where, okay, I have 90 minutes now. I'm going to pick 3 elements that I want to focus on and do them for 30 minutes throughout the day. And they don't even have to be in one long session. I can do 3 30-minute segments throughout the day. So yeah,
Mm.
I think for me, that was a huge shift. And I think, anybody can kind of relate to this. Like, if you have massive life change or you're looking for change, whether it's expected or unexpected, it's about being able to adapt your identity to that and not letting your identity get lost because of the change.
Wow, that's super powerful. I think that's a good place to kind of wrap this up here. I think, yeah, that's super powerful sentiment. And I think it really underscores the point that I'm trying to make with this, which, yes, this course will be a tool to help people start this kind of practice or revisit it from a fresh new mindset. But really, this isn't about mobility. This isn't about like, you will see benefits of like, okay, now you have more shoulder flexion or whatever. But
Right.
at the same time, it's about the intention behind that and using this as a tool to make you a better human and uh, guide you and ground you through those changes rather than being like a rote structure that some coach or somebody is giving you. It's more of this like innate motivation to make the best of your life.
Yeah. Yeah. That totally like just hit the nail on the head. um,
Amazing. Awesome.
cool. Well, yeah, this is great. I mean, I hope I was able to not get like too far off track. I tend to get really excited. So,
No,
um,
we appreciate, I love your excitement. I love your enthusiasm, which is why I wanted to speak with you. So thank you so much for sharing all of your insights. I mean, literally your answers almost like exactly followed the outline that I made for the course. So thank you
okay.
for
Okay.
catching my brainwaves.
Yeah. For those
And
out
it's
there,
good to
this like
know that.
I have no cliff notes on this talk. I was
Yeah, for people listening, I did not send them the outline. That is
no.
just, we just think similarly, which is great because, you know, if you hear the same things from multiple coaches who are doing similar things in their field, it means that we're not just pulling this out of thin air. So amazing. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate everything. And I'm excited. So how can people connect with you if they want to get a hold of you?
Sure. Instagram. I'm on this all the social platforms. So I'm on IG. It's coach underscore Vishal Kumar, VISHAL KUMAR. I'm also on like Facebook, but Instagram's probably the best way to reach me for that. And yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Vishal. I hope you have a great day and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Missy. Take care.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.